I never meant to listen to the bridges. People think that sounds strange, impossible even. How can you listen to a structure of steel and stone? But in my city, in the months before everything unraveled, the bridges spoke. Not loudly, not in any voice meant for ears. They whispered, low and cold, threading beneath the wind like something alive. Most people walked across unaware. Some paused, sensing a change in the air, a tremor in the railings. But only a few of us heard words. And of those few, not many survived. I suppose my story began the night I crossed the asphalt bridge after closing the shop. I had taken that same route home for 6 years. I never feared anything there. The bridge was wide, lit by tall lamps, and usually crowded even at late hours. But that night, the street had emptied early. The fog rolled in fast from the river, thick as wool, and the lamps flickered with an odd, nervous energy. My footsteps echoed, too loudly, as though the bridge itself were hollow. That was when I heard it. A tremor, a tone, a breath, and then words. Come back. Just two. And so soft I thought it must have been the wind tangled under the archway. I stopped walking, suddenly cold. The fog swirled around my legs, its edges shimmering as if lit by something unseen. I peered through it, searching for a person, a prankster, anyone who might have spoken. But there was no one. Not ahead, not behind. Just the hum of the river below, restless and dark. I took a step forward. Something brushed the air beside my ear, light as fingers made of breath. Come back. I remember you. I froze so hard my bones felt locked in place. The whisper wasn't shaped like a voice, not exactly. It was the groan of stretched cables formed into syllables, the rumble of metal expanding in the cold made into a murmur. A voice built from tension and weight. I exhaled sharply. Who's there? I said, though I knew it wasn't a someone. The whisper didn't answer, but the handrail vibrated beneath my fingers, a deep, shuddering hum that traveled up my arm and down my spine. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't right. I hurried off the bridge. When I reached the street on the other side, the whispering stopped as abruptly as a light turned off. The fog thinned. Cars appeared again. People moved normally. My heartbeat, however, refused to settle. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the long week had gotten to me, that I was tired. It wasn't until the next morning, when I passed the same bridge on the tram and saw police tape fluttering at the railing, that I understood it wasn't imagination. Someone had gone missing during the night. A woman, last seen walking alone across Asphalt Bridge. And she had vanished without a sound. I should have stayed away. I should have ignored the whispers and gone on living like everyone else who only sensed the bridges were changing but refused to believe it. But the thing about a whisper is that it burrows deep. It lingers. And worst of all, it remembers you. For days, I avoided crossing Asphalt Bridge. I took detours, walked longer routes. I told myself it wasn't fear, only caution. But the truth settled heavy inside me. Something was wrong in the bones of the city. Other bridges began developing problems. The lantern span's cables vibrated so violently at night that the maintenance crews shut it down for inspection. People complained about dizziness on the Willowbend overpass, claiming they heard faint humming that made them forget where they were. And another person disappeared, this time from the Crescent Walkway. No body, no splash reported. No witnesses, just gone, whispered away. One evening, as I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker strangely across the river, I heard it again. Not in the streets, not in my memory, but through the glass. A faint tremor, like steel sighing. Then a phrase, almost pleading, "Why did you leave?" I stepped back from the window so fast I hit the table behind me. The glass pane vibrated gently, as if touched by distant machinery. My breath fogged in the suddenly cold air. The river was half a mile away, and still the bridges called to me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I drifted close to dreams, I felt the tug, the quiet, insistent pull of something vast reaching through the city's frame. By dawn, I had made a decision that felt less like a choice and more like surrender. I had to go back to Asphalt Bridge, not out of bravery, out of inevitability, out of fear that if I didn't face it, it would come for me anyway. I left the apartment just as the sun began to rise. Mist clung low to the water. The city was sluggish, still half asleep. The bridge loomed ahead, its silhouette black against the pale morning. As I approached, the air thickened. Not with fog, this was different. Heavier, pressurized. The moment my shoe touched the bridge's edge, I felt a pulse run through the structure, as though the entire span shivered in recognition. You returned. My throat tightened. The whisper slid under my skin, curling in the space between ribs. Come closer. I should have turned back, but something warm brushed my mind. A strange, thrumming comfort. The same feeling, I realized, that lures prey toward a predator's hidden teeth. I took another step. The bridge vibrated gently, almost welcoming. A soft sigh rose from beneath the planks. I missed you. And then a sound like a distant splash. I stopped. At the railing, something dripped. Water pooled between the bars. Clear, shimmering water, though the river below was dark and muddy. The droplets trailed upward, as if gravity had forgotten them. Slipping along the metal toward my hand, I jerked back. The whisper grew frustrated. Don't leave. The upward-moving droplets quivered, reaching. That was when I saw it. A shadow beneath the railings, not cast by sun or lamp, but shaped like a human silhouette, clinging unnaturally to the side of the bridge. And the shadow was looking at me, its head tilted, its fingers stretched along the steel. Its form wavered like ink suspended in water. Recognition hit me like ice. It wasn't a shadow. It was hers, the missing woman, or what remained of her. She reached toward me with emotion too fluid to belong to anything alive. Come back, the whisper said. But this time it wasn't the bridge. It was her. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, and then her shadowy shape jerked violently, dragged downward by something unseen, and vanished beneath the surface of the structure. The bridge let out a long, hungry groan. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the far end, panting so hard my lungs burned. But even as I staggered into the street, even as normal sounds returned, the buses, the voices, the clatter of morning traffic, I felt it again. A whisper behind my ear. Next time, don't run. For the rest of the day, everything felt wrong. At the shop, I kept dropping things. Pens, receipts, a ceramic figurine that shattered on the counter and left customers staring at me with unease. My boss asked if I was sick. I said yes, though the truth was worse. I felt watched. Not by people, by structures. Every time I passed a window that reflected even a sliver of a bridge, I felt the tug again, faint but insistent, like a hook in the mind. The whispers were quiet in daylight, but not gone, never gone. And the image of the shadow woman, her form peeling away from the metal like wet ink, wouldn't leave me. I told myself I wouldn't go near the bridges again. By sunset, I found myself standing at the foot of another one. Crescent Walkway. I realized then that choice had nothing to do with it anymore. The Crescent Walkway was the prettiest bridge in the city, made of pale stones with iron lanterns lining the sides. Couples took photos there during the day. Joggers loved its wide path. But now, at dusk, the lanterns flickered wildly, as though something inside them scratched at their glass. The air hummed with the same low frequency I had felt before. Felt, not heard, like a vibration through my bones. I moved slowly, trying to keep my distance from the railing. You shouldn't be here. The whisper slid across my skull like a cold fingertip. I froze. What do you want? Silence. Only not silence. A deep inhale, metallic and slow. Then a chorus of faint murmurs, so low they blended with the groaning of the structure. One more step, closer. Please. The voices were different than those on Asphalt Bridge. Higher, more urgent. Dozens, maybe hundreds of tiny strings of sound woven together. My heart hammered. I backed up, but the air behind me felt thick, like wading through water. The fog crept across the walkway, tendrils curling around the lantern poles. It wasn't white anymore. It shimmered with faint streaks of green, like submerged algae caught in moonlight. Something shifted beneath the bridge. A splash, too soft to be real. Then another. I forced myself not to look, but the whispers thickened, wrapping around my thoughts like vines. Don't ignore us. Don't pretend you can't hear. We heard you long before you heard us. I swallowed hard. Why me? The ground beneath my feet vibrated, a long, trembling sigh passing through stone. Then, slowly, you listen. 3 simple words, spoken with such certainty I felt them bruise the inside of my skull. I wanted to scream that I never chose to listen, that I hadn't asked for any of this. But the truth sat heavy in my throat. Some part of me had heard the bridges long before they began whispering words. The rhythmic creaks during temperature shifts, the subtle moans of strained cables, the faint resonance when footsteps aligned just right. Maybe I'd always been tuned to hear things others ignored. Maybe the bridges had been waiting for someone like that. Someone like me. I stepped back instinctively, and my heel hit something soft. I spun around. Puddle. Except it wasn't shaped like a puddle. It was shaped like a footprint. Then another. Then a trail leading toward the railing. The prints glistened with the same shimmering green that swirled through the fog. They were wet, yet there was no rain. No leaking pipe. No reason for them to exist. What are you trying to show me? I whispered. The bridge exhaled. The lanterns burned brighter. And then I heard it. A distant, muffled cry. A human cry. I lunged toward the railing before I could stop myself, gripping the cold iron. My breath caught. There, clinging to the underside of the bridge's arch, was another shadowy figure. This one larger, its limbs stretched unnaturally long, as if pulled like taffy. It writhed, struggling as unseen tendrils dragged it downward. A man's voice echoed faintly, "Help, please!" The shadows around him tightened. His body jerked. Then he was yanked backward into the stone itself, disappearing like a smear wiped away. I stumbled back, heart racing so fast I tasted copper. But before the horror had time to fully hit, something else happened. A new voice whispered. Not the bridge, not the shadows. This one was closer, inside my head. "You can free us," I gasped. The fog thickened, swirling around my legs, pulling me forward, guiding me to the center of the walkway. My feet moved against my will. "You can hear us, so you can free us?" I shook my head violently. "I don't know what you want me to do." The chorus answered in unison, their combined whisper splitting into 1,000 blades of sound. "Come down." Come down where? My knees buckled, my vision blurred, and the last thing I saw before collapsing to the cold stone was a ripple in the fog forming the shape of a face. Eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent, eternal plea. I woke on the cold floor of my apartment hours later. I had no memory of leaving the bridge, no memory of the walk home. My shoes were soaked. My clothes smelled faintly of river water. And on my forearm, smeared like ink from a drenched pen, was the imprint of a hand. Thin, shadow-like, clinging. I rubbed it frantically, but the mark didn't fade. It sank deeper into my skin until it settled beneath the surface, like it had always belonged there. Something inside the whispering bridges had touched me, claimed me, and as I sat trembling in the dark, I heard a new whisper, clearer than ever, from beneath the floorboards, from the pipes, from the window, from the entire skeleton of the city. "Next time, you won't wake alone." I didn't go to work the next day. Couldn't. I sat on the edge of my bed with the curtains closed tight, lights off, phone face down on the floor. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The refrigerator hum, the radiator clicking, the faint rumbling of traffic outside. All of it layered beneath something else, something faint yet unmistakable. The whispering, not words this time, more like breathing, a slow, steady exhale moving through the walls as if the entire building shared lungs with the bridges. I tried to tell myself I was hallucinating, but then the mark on my arm twitched. Not my skin. The mark. The hand-shaped stain pulsed once, like a heartbeat. My breath shattered in my throat. I grabbed a towel and scrubbed until my arm burned red, but the imprint remained, cold and dark and impossibly deep, like it was etched beneath the flesh. And as I stared at it, something slid across my mind, a memory that wasn't mine. Dark water, stone arches above me, a rope of shadow pulling my ankle, a voice screaming my name, though I'd never heard it before. Then silence. Weighted, suffocating silence. When I jerked back to myself, I was on the floor, trembling so hard my teeth clattered. The memory hadn't been mine. It belonged to the man I'd seen vanish under the crescent walkway. The bridges weren't just whispering anymore. They were showing, giving me pieces, imprints, echoes of the lost. Why? To torment me? To warn me? Or to draw me deeper? My phone buzzed on the floor. I flinched so aggressively I smacked my elbow on the bedpost. Hands shaking, I checked the screen. A news alert. Another disappearance on Willowbend overpass. Authorities urge citizens to avoid bridges until further notice. There was a photo attached. A blurred image of a dark smudge clinging to the side of the railing like a wet shadow. I dropped the phone immediately. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave the city. I packed a bag. Only a few things: wallet, clothes, charger. My hands shook so badly I could barely zip the bag shut. I didn't know where I'd go. A friend outside town. A motel on the highway. Anywhere without bridges. I stepped into the hallway. The building was quiet. Too quiet. No neighbor sounds, no pipes creaking, no distant TV through the walls. Just the whispering. As if the walls leaned closer when I moved. I forced myself to descend the stairs, gripping the railing hard enough that my knuckles blanched. The stairwell lights flickered, plunging me into darkness every few steps, then flashing back on as if indecisive. Just one more floor. Just one more. When I reached the entrance, my relief was so sharp it hurt. I pushed the door open and stopped. Fog sat thick over the street. Not drifting, not swirling, just waiting. My pulse spiked. I stepped back. That was when the fog surged inward like a living thing. I stumbled, slamming the door shut before it could spill into the hallway. Something thudded against the other side, soft but insistent, like fingertips made of vapor. I backed away slowly. The door handle rattled once, twice, then stopped. Silence swelled in the hall. My options collapsed to one. I couldn't leave through the street. I had to cut through the back of the building, the service exit that opened into the alley. No bridges crossed there. No views of the river. I clung to that hope like a shield. I moved fast, bag clutched tight, my breath shallow. The service hallway was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb. At the end was a heavy metal door with a rusted push bar. My hand was inches from it when I heard the whisper. Not behind me, ahead. Leaving so soon? The metal bar chilled instantly, frosting over in an instant. A web of thin ice spread across the door, hissing like steam trapped inside. I stepped back, heart hammering. "Why won't you let me go?" I whispered. The answer came from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating through the floor, the ceiling, the air itself. "You listened. Now you belong. We claimed you." The mark on my arm burned icy cold. My vision blurred at the edges as panic surged through my chest. "I won't go back," I said through gritted teeth. "I won't go near the bridges again." "You will." The certainty in the whisper was unbearable. "When the water calls." Suddenly the door behind me, the one leading back to the main hall, slammed open. Wind rushed in. Not wind. Mist. Dense and silver, pouring into the hallway like water spilling from a broken pipe, rippling across the floor toward me. I turned to run. The mist reached me first. It wrapped around my ankles with icy tenderness. It twined up my legs, slow but unbreakable, like hands guiding a drowning body downward. I crashed to the floor, clawing at the tiles, but the mist only tightened. The whisper grew louder, layering into countless voices, all speaking at once. "Come back, come back, come back." My fingers scraped uselessly against the cold ground. Then, something snapped inside me. Not physically, mentally. A surge of resistance I didn't know I had. I screamed. Not a word. Not a plea. A raw, primal refusal. The fog recoiled. For a split second, everything went still. Then the whispering faltered, just slightly, but enough. Enough for me to break free. I scrambled to my feet, stumbled through the hall, and burst into the laundry room at the far end. A tiny window sat above the washers, a rectangle barely wider than my shoulders. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I climbed. Glass scraped my arms. My bag snagged and tore. But I forced myself through, crashing onto the cold concrete outside. I lay there, gasping, heart thunderous, arms bleeding. The whispering had stopped. The fog hadn't followed me out here. I wasn't safe, not really, but I had bought myself a moment of breathing room. I clung to that moment like a drowning person clings to driftwood. And as I staggered to my feet, one thought burned through my mind like a warning flare. The bridges didn't just want me near them. They wanted me beneath them. And whatever waited there, it wanted me alive. The alley behind my building was narrow and nearly pitch black, lit only by the amber glow of a single street lamp near the far end. My breath fogged in front of me. Not the ordinary kind, colder, heavier, tinted faintly green under the dim light. I clutched my torn bag, heartbeat pounding so violently it felt like it might shake my ribs apart. My apartment, my only refuge, was cut off behind a wall of sentient mist. Couldn't go back. The street in front of the building was impossible to reach. Every way out that involved approaching a bridge, even tangentially, felt like walking willingly into a predator's open mouth. Still, I had to move. Standing still was too close to surrender. I crept down the alley, sticking close to the wall. Broken glass crunched under my boots. Something scurried under a dumpster. Behind me, the laundry room window still stood open, fluttering slightly with the draft, like a mouth stuck mid-breath. But there were no whispers. For the first time since stepping onto Crescent Walkway, I heard nothing unnatural. No voices, no breathing walls, no invisible hands. Terrified me more than the noise, because the silence didn't feel empty, felt watchful. I made it to the end of the alley, but froze the moment I stepped out onto the connecting street. Every car parked along the curb was coated with dew. Only it wasn't dew. It was something thicker, glossier, like condensation from deep tunnels where sunlight never reached. The droplets glimmered green-blue in the streetlight, the same way the fog had on the Crescent Walkway, the same way the handprint on my arm had pulsed. I checked the storefronts, hoping for signs of life. The diner across the street should have been open. It stayed open past midnight every day. But the lights were off. Chairs were tipped on tables. The interior was dark and empty. The hair on the back of my neck rose. Had something spread? Were the bridges expanding their reach? I backed away from the street and turned toward the one place I never thought I'd willingly go at night. The drainage tunnels. They were old, carved beneath the city decades before modern infrastructure. Most people didn't even know their entrances still existed behind certain buildings. I knew because the shop where I worked had a basement that connected to one of them. I had hated that basement, but I hated the idea of stepping near the bridges even more. So I headed there. The old entrance hid behind a rusted metal grate wedged beneath a leaning fence. I had to push hard to bend it enough to crawl through. The metal squealed, echoing through the alley. I flinched at the noise, terrified it might attract attention from something listening. I dropped down into the tunnel. It smelled of damp stone and old iron. My boots splashed into shallow water. The walls were slick with moss. A thin trickle of runoff flowed toward the deeper chambers of the drainage system. At least the mist couldn't reach me here, or so I hoped. I moved quickly, letting my phone's flashlight guide me. The beam flickered across graffiti, pipes, and the occasional rat darting across the path. With each step, the weight of the city above me grew heavier. My thoughts twisted into knots. What was happening on the surface? How far did the whispering spread? Were the bridges influencing the water systems too? Then something hit the tunnel wall near my shoulder. A drop, then another. I raised the flashlight. The ceiling dripped. Not clear water. Dark, thick droplets like ink thinned with river sludge. My stomach twisted. They smelled like the river beneath Ashfall Bridge. I took a step backward. A wrong step. My boot slipped on the wet stone. I fell, splashing into the shallow water, soaking my clothes. My phone flew from my hand and skidded along the floor, the flashlight beam spinning wildly across the tunnel. It hit the far wall and went dark. No, no, no! I scrambled for it, hands shaking. Before I reached it, the whisper returned. Slow, deep, rolling like a submerged current. You went the wrong way. I froze. I couldn't see the source. The tunnel was too dark. The voice sounded distant, echoing up through cracks in the stone, maybe from storm drains connected to the river. Then I heard splashes, rhythmic, approaching. Something was walking in the water. I reached for my phone again, fingers desperate. When I finally grabbed it, I slammed my thumb against the power button until the flashlight flickered on. My breath stopped. There were footprints behind me, fresh ones, dozens, trailing out of the dark water, human-shaped, but shifting, sliding at the edges like they had no bones, no real form holding them together. The whisper deepened. Turn around. My hand shook so hard the flashlight beam jittered violently. I forced my body to turn. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, in the corner of my vision, a shape, clinging to the wall like a lizard, pale, long-limbed, its head lolled sideways, eyes black as oil, dripping water onto the floor. One arm stretched toward me, bones popping unnaturally. His mouth opened. Water spilled out. Not a trickle, an endless stream. It leaned closer and whispered, "Free us." My body reacted faster than my mind. I ran. I bolted through the tunnels, splashing through the water, lungs burning with terror. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The whispers followed, echoing off the walls, warping into shrieks of metallic agony. I burst through the tunnel exit behind the shop, slammed into a stack of crates, and dragged myself up into the cold night air. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away. When I finally slowed, panting in the shadows of an abandoned rail yard, a sick realization hit me. The bridges weren't just whispering to lure people. They were whispering because something inside them was trapped. And whatever that long-limbed creature had been, it wanted me to help release them. But release them from what? From the river? From the stone? From the city? Or something older? Something buried beneath all three? As I pressed my back against a rusted freight car, trying to steady my breathing, the whisper reached me again. Calmer this time, almost gentle. "We're waiting, listener." And in the direction of the river, where the silhouettes of the bridges cut across the sky, every light flickered at once, as if the entire city had blinked. The freight yard was dead quiet, too quiet for a place that bordered two major streets and a tram line. Even the insects fell silent, as if the night itself was holding its breath. I crouched behind the rusted freight car, sweat chilling on my skin despite the cold. My pulse hammered against my throat. The whispering had gone still again, but that didn't comfort me. Silence felt more dangerous now, because silence meant they were listening. I peered over the edge of the freight car. The yard stretched out in jagged rows of rusted containers, broken rails, and overgrown weeds. The faint glow of the city clung to the skyline, but here, in this forgotten place, the world felt pulled away from reality. Then I heard it, not a whisper, a hum, low and resonant, like the plucked string of a massive instrument, came from underground. The rails vibrated beneath my feet. I crouched, pressing my palm to the cold steel track. The vibration pulsed in steady rhythm, slow, deliberate, heavy, like a heartbeat, the heartbeat of something enormous. My breath caught. Could the entire network of bridges be connected? Were the structures alive because something beneath the city was alive? Feeding, breathing, waiting? The hum deepened, making the rails quiver. Then clang. A metallic slam echoed through the yard. I spun around, scrambling behind a container. Another slam. Closer. The old maintenance shack at the edge of the yard shuddered. The padlock door jerked violently, once, twice, as if struck from inside. Clang. The chain rattled like something was trying to break out. My legs went numb. "No, no," the shack groaned. A wet, Dragging sound slid beneath the door. Something seeped out. A dark liquid, too thick to be water, but too fluid to be mud, oozing toward me in tendrils. The same sludge that dripped from the creature in the drainage tunnel. The same sludge that coated the cars on the street. The same sludge that clung to the bridges. The tendrils reached the base of the freight container. My breath hitched. I pressed back against the metal until the bolts dug into my spine. The ooze curled along the ground like a living shadow. Then it paused. Sniffing, searching, pulled back. It began to gather itself, rising into a shape, forming a thin column like a spine made of liquid darkness. My mouth went dry. The column expanded, stretching, shivering, twisting, and a distorted, faceless head formed at the top. Its surface rippled like ink stirred by breath. The head tilted, and the whisper came from it directly, clear and sharp. "Listener." The force of it nearly buckled my knees. My pulse roared in my ears. "I don't want any of this," I whispered, voice shaking. "Just leave me alone." The creature quivered. Then its voice, layered with a chorus of trapped echoes, answered, "We don't choose." It stepped closer, if the movement could be called stepping. Its form slid forward without displacing the grass or dirt, as if it moved between moments. "You heard us, so you are marked." I clutched my arm. The spot where the handprint had embedded itself beneath my skin pulsed faintly, like a second heartbeat. "What do you want from me?" The creature's head lowered, its faceless front inches from mine. "To free the drowned voices." A chill cut through me. "I don't know how." The creature's body shuddered, as if frustrated or pained. "The bridges know." The heartbeat beneath the rails throbbed again, louder this time. The containers around me vibrated. The ground rippled. Something enormous was shifting below. "They wait for you," the creature whispered.
No, iwisparat.
"I won't go back near them." The creature's head snapped upright. The whisper became a hiss. "You will." Its body expanded suddenly, unfurling arms made of coiling tendrils, reaching for me. I stumbled backward, slipping on the gravel, heart slamming against my ribs. The creature surged forward. I spun and ran. I sprinted through the freight yard, lungs burning, boots slipping on wet rails, shadows lashing across my vision. The rails hummed louder behind me. The heartbeat deepened. The ground shook. The creature's whispers sliced through the air like razors. "Don't run. Come back. Come back." I reached the perimeter fence, a tall, chain-link barrier topped with barbed wire. I didn't think. I climbed. The metal cut into my palms. My backpack snagged on the wire and tore further, spilling clothes into the dark. I kicked free and tumbled over the other side onto hard pavement. Pain shot up my leg, but I forced myself up and limped into the street. Cars passed. People walked. Streetlights glowed normally. Normal life, unaware, untouched. But behind me, in the dark of the rail yard, the hum continued. So deep I felt it in my bones. No one else seemed to hear it. Only me. Only the listener. And when I looked back, the creature stood on the other side of the fence, pressed against the metal, its form flattened like a shadow trying to force itself through a crack. Its head tilted. It whispered one last message before sinking back into the yard's darkness. "When the water rises, you will come." My legs nearly gave out. Staggered away, terrified tears burning down my face, knowing one truth with a clarity sharper than fear. No matter where I ran in this city, the bridges, and whatever lived beneath them, would find me. Because they were waking, and they were hungry. I continued walking, though the ground beneath me felt softer than it should have. Like the stones were loosening just for me, like they wanted me to sink. A thin, wavering glow trembled under the arch of the next bridge, and even before I reached it, the whisper unfurled again.
Come closer.
The voice had changed. Not the deep, dragging tone I'd heard on the West Bridge. This one was almost coaxing, breathless, younger. I froze. "I'm not listening," I whispered, pressing my palms against my ears even though I knew that never helped. Sound from the bridges never entered through the ears. It burrowed directly into the mind. Still, covering them made me feel at least human. A sudden splash broke the silence. I spun to the water. A shape drifted there. Dark, limp, barely visible in the mist. My heart hammered, and for a moment I thought it was a floating body. But then it shifted, rotating with the current, and I saw it was only an abandoned coat. A long one, dark wool, the kind a city engineer might wear when inspecting infrastructure at night. My throat tightened. I recognized that coat. It looked exactly like the one wardens used. Exactly like the one Captain Wren had on earlier that day. I crouched before I realized what I was doing. Reaching for it. Stupid, stupid. Leaning out over the edge. The water lapped the stone like a mouth tasting its prey. The coat drifted just out of reach, brushing the underside of the bridge before the current tugged it back toward me. I hesitated. Then the whisper came again. If you want the truth, follow him. The coat bumped gently against the stone, as if nudging my hand.
No, Ibrata.
No, but my fingers were already closing around the drenched wool, lifting it from the water. It was heavier than I expected, soaked through. I dragged it onto the walkway, nearly losing my balance. As I straightened, something slipped out of the coat pocket and clinked onto the stone. A key. Not a normal key, longer, older, forged from blackened metal. Its teeth were serrated in a way that made my skin crawl, like they were meant not just to unlock something, but to wound it. I stared at it, blood pounding in my ears. Captain Wren had been the only person in the city with the authority to access the underbridge vaults, sealed rooms beneath major crossings that were supposedly designed for maintenance and emergency systems. No one else had clearance. No one else even had physical keys anymore. The city had moved to digital locks ages ago. So why did Wren have an antique one? Why was it floating in the river inside an abandoned coat? And where was he? Before I could think further, the whisper slid against my mind again, this time from directly beneath my feet. Bring it back. My stomach hollowed. I stepped away instinctively, clutching the key so tightly its jagged edges bit into my palm. The bridge groaned. A long, low creak traveled through the stone like something massive was shifting inside it. The railings trembled. Dust shook loose from the arch overhead. I backed up farther. Bring it back, or I'll come for you. That voice was not coaxing anymore. I turned and ran. The streets were empty. Most people avoided the riverside at night now, and those who didn't rarely lasted long. My footsteps echoed sharply, too loud, like the world was listening. I reached the end of the lane, heart slamming against my ribs, and ducked into a narrow alley between two shuttered shops. Only then did I realize my hands were shaking uncontrollably. The coat, the key, the whisper. Captain Wren was missing, or worse, and the bridge knew. I sank to a crouch behind a dumpster, trying to steady my breath. The city lights flickered overhead, bouncing off the wet pavement in trembling reflections. Every shadow pressed inward like it was listening too. I forced myself to think. If Wren was gone, if the bridges were becoming more aggressive, then whatever was happening had escalated beyond anything the wardens anticipated. And now, for reasons I didn't understand, I had something the bridges wanted. The key throbbed with a dull, cold pulse in my grip, as if it had a heartbeat. No, I muttered, dropping it onto the ground. You're a piece of metal. That's all. But even after I released it, the phantom sensation lingered in my palm. I needed help, or at least information. Someone who knew more than I did about the old structure beneath the city. There was only one name that came to mind.
Lise.
The only person I'd ever known who claimed she could hear the bridges long before the rest of us could, and who hadn't fallen into the trance, hadn't vanished, hadn't drowned. She lived on the far side of the river, near the abandoned tram yards. And to reach her, I'd have to cross at least one more bridge. My entire body tensed at the thought. I stared at the key on the ground. Its metal caught the streetlight faintly, reflecting a sliver of dull silver. "What the hell are you?" I whispered. It didn't answer, but the river did. A long, distant, shuddering moan drifted up the streets like a warning. No, not a warning. A call. A summons. I swallowed hard, scooped up the key, and slipped back into the night. If the bridges wanted me to bring it somewhere, then Liz was the only one who might tell me why. And maybe, just maybe, how to survive it. I kept to the narrowest streets, following the dim glow of far-off lamps until the river reappeared through gaps in the buildings. The nearest crossing was the Millway Bridge, old, rusted, sagging slightly at the center. City repair crews had placed warning signs around it, but no one dared remove it entirely. People said it cried when workers tried. Tonight, its lights were out. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat distortion, except the night was cold enough that my breath fogged with each exhale. I stopped at the foot of the bridge. The whisper was waiting, patient, hungry. Come. Not for you, I muttered, but I stepped forward anyway. The wood beneath my boot creaked like a slow intake of breath. I moved cautiously, every muscle tight, eyes trained on the dark water below. The river churned, uneasy, as though something massive hid just beneath the surface. Halfway across, the mist thickened around me, curling up in tendrils that tugged at my sleeves. I gripped the rail. The whisper deepened. You carry what was stolen. Not by me. It returns through you. The boards trembled. A hairline crack raced across the walkway beside my foot. Bring it home. Home? I hesitated, pulse spiking. The bridge wasn't trying to pull me under, not yet. It wanted the key. But where was home? The river? The vaults? Somewhere deeper? The mist surged suddenly, wrapping around my legs like hands. I yanked myself free, stumbling the last few steps until my boots hit solid ground on the other side. The instant I crossed, the mist dropped behind me like a curtain falling shut. The whisper vanished. I didn't breathe until the bridge was several meters behind me. Only then did I realize that sweat had soaked through my clothes despite the cold. My lungs burned. My fingers ached from gripping the key too tightly. But at least I was across. And Liz was only a few streets away. I followed the old tram tracks until the abandoned yard came into view. Massive skeletal frames of rusted carriages sitting silently in the dark. Beyond them, a row of small brick apartments leaned crookedly against each other like drunks. Liz lived in the third one. A single window glowed faintly. I climbed the steps, raised my hand, and knocked. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lock clicked. The door cracked open. A pale face peered out. Sharp features, hair a tangled mess, eyes too alert for someone who should have been asleep. When she saw me, her expression didn't soften. It sharpened. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I need to talk to you. No, she tried to close the door. I blocked it with my boot. Liz, Captain Wren is missing. Her fingers went still on the wood. And the bridges? I continued, lowering my voice. They're talking more, stronger, and they said something was stolen. Something I think I have. I opened my palm. The key glinted in the dim light. Liz went absolutely still. Then she whispered, barely audible. Where did you get that? It washed up near the West Bridge. In Wren's coat. Her eyes widened with a kind of fear I'd never seen from her before. She opened the door fully. Get inside, she said. Now. I stepped in, and she slammed the door behind us, locking every bolt. She turned to me, face pale, voice shaking. You don't know what you're carrying, she whispered. You don't know what the bridges really are. I swallowed. Then tell me. She backed away from me like I was holding a live weapon. That key, she said slowly, doesn't open a vault. She lifted her eyes to mine. It opens a mouth. I felt my blood drain from my face. A mouth? What do you mean? I asked. She shook her head, pacing, gripping her own arms like she was trying to hold herself together. The city was never built on solid ground, she said. Everyone knows that, but they don't know what's actually underneath it. They don't know why the first builders made bridges everywhere, even where no water used to flow.
Ist here.
What's under it? She stopped moving. Her voice dropped to a whisper barely louder than breath. A sleeping thing, she said. A vast, ancient thing, buried in the mud long before the city existed. My mouth went dry. The bridges aren't just bridges, Liz continued. They're bindings, restraints, Anchors hammered into the bones of whatever lies beneath. They've kept it dormant for centuries. Her eyes flicked to the key. That was one of the original locks. Shiver crawled up my spine. Why would Wren have it? I whispered. Liz sat heavily on a chair, exhaling shakily. Because someone is trying to wake it, she said. Someone inside the wardens. Someone who knows exactly what those bindings do.
Ist her, stunned?
And now, she said softly, the Bridges want the key back, because if they lose even one of the locks. The floor vibrated. Barely. Like a heartbeat deep beneath the earth.
Liz froze.
So did I. The vibration faded just as quickly. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. It's already stirring. I swallowed, my throat tight. What do we do? I whispered. Liz didn't answer at first. Then she stood slowly, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain back just enough to peer outside. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. First, she whispered, we survive until morning. I moved closer. And after that? She looked at me. Her eyes were dark with dread. After that, she said, we go beneath the bridges. The floor trembled again. And this time, the whisper wasn't inside my mind. Came from outside, from the street below, rising through the very stones. Bring it back. To me. Liz stepped away from the window. The city won't sleep tonight, she whispered. And neither would we. Liz backed away from the window as if the whisper itself might seep through the glass. I felt the panic coiling in my spine, cold and electric. For all the strange things I'd heard from the Bridges, I had never felt the ground shudder like that before. Never heard the whisper rise from beneath the actual streets. Something had changed. Something had shifted. I tightened my grip on the key, though I hated the feel of it. The serrated metal seemed to pulse faintly. Maybe from the trembling of my hand, maybe from something else.
Liz noticed.
Put it down, she said sharply. At least for now. It followed me here, I whispered. What difference does it make? Keys remember their doors, she murmured. And doors remember what they're meant to hold shut. The room felt too small suddenly, too quiet. Even the hum of the street lamps outside had gone dead. Liz paced to her cluttered desk, rifling through old folders, brittle blueprints, notebooks coated with dust. She had always kept strange maps around, diagrams of the city's understructure, sketches of the bridges drawn at odd angles with annotations like breath cycle and vocal strain scribbled in the margins. I'd once asked her why she cared so much about bridges, and she had simply said, because they care about us. At the time, I'd thought she was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. She slammed an old leather-bound folder onto the table. Look, I stepped closer. Inside were architectural sketches. But wrong. Bridges drawn as though they were organic, spines instead of beams, ribs instead of arches, roots instead of supports. Lines connected them like nerves. What am I looking at? I whispered. The truth. Or the closest thing I found. Liz tapped the central diagram. A sprawling network beneath the city, shaped like a great coiled mass. These aren't official documents. They're older, passed through hands that shouldn't have had them. And this thing, I pointed to the coiled shape, is what's under the city? A part of it. A fraction. Liz rubbed her face. No one living has seen the whole of it. Another small tremor rippled through the floorboards. The lamp flickered. We both froze.
Liz exhaled shakily.
Did it hear us? Everything hears us tonight, I said before I could stop myself. She shut the folder and slid it under a stack of books, as if hiding the drawings could hide the truth. We have to be careful. The more you talk about it, the more it listens. I thought of the bridges whispering in the minds of anyone who walked close enough. I thought of the drowning victims who simply stepped forward, eyes unfocused, lips moving as if repeating something only they could hear. What does it want? I asked. Liz lowered her voice to nearly nothing. To wake. The air seemed to thicken. But why now? I asked. If the bridges have held it this long, what changed? She hesitated. Then, someone removed its bindings. Slowly. quietly, piece by piece. You mean this key? That key is one of them. But others? She shook her head. The bridges have been weakening for months. Haven't you noticed? The creaking, the stone dust, the voices. Voices, plural. I swallowed hard. I had only ever heard one voice from each bridge. But now that she'd said it, there had been differences, tones, personalities. How many bridges are we talking about? I asked. All of them. As if on cue, a long, distant groan rolled through the night air outside, like metal dragged across stone. It vibrated through the walls and up my ribs. I moved to the window despite myself. Don't, Liz warned. Too late. The moment I brushed the curtain aside, the city outside shifted. Lights flickered across the riverbanks. Mist rose in slow spirals from the water, catching the pale glow and pulsing faintly, like veins illuminated under skin. And the bridges swayed. Not much. Not enough that an ordinary person would notice. But I could see it. The faint, rhythmic rise and fall, as though they were breathing. Every single one of them. The breath of the city. The breath of something beneath it. Liz grabbed my sleeve and yanked me back. Don't look. What difference does it make if I look? They already know where I am. They don't see you through your eyes, she said. They feel you through your attention. What does that even mean? It means, she said, stepping back, the more you focus on them, the less you exist anywhere else. The phrasing made my blood run cold. Sit, she said. We need to stay grounded. He said. She dimmed the lights, leaving only a small lamp glowing between us. Tell me everything that happened tonight, she said. I told her. All of it. The whisper at the West Bridge. The coat. The key. The way the mist almost wrapped around my legs. The bridges calling for me. The threat. When I finished, Liz stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then she said quietly, "It chose you." My stomach dropped. What does that mean? She leaned back, her hair falling around her face like a dark curtain. Some people are more receptive than others. Not because they're gifted, because they're hollowed out in the right places. Are you saying I'm empty? I'm saying you've survived pain that most people would break under. Her gaze softened. People like that make good vessels. A chill traced my spine. I'm not a vessel. You don't get to choose that, she said softly. Another tremor. Stronger. The lamp rattled. The entire apartment held its breath. Then crack. A sharp sound echoed from somewhere outside. I darted to the window again despite Liz grabbing for me. A narrow footbridge just 2 blocks away had split down the middle. Not collapsed. Split. Cleanly, vertically, like something beneath it had bitten upward through the stone and wood. Mist poured out of the crack like steam escaping a wound. People on the distant street screamed and scattered. Liz went pale. It's earlier than I thought, she whispered. What is? They're not waiting for dawn. Then she turned to me, her voice trembling but clear. It's waking now. The ground trembled harder, like a pulse. A heartbeat. Slow. Massive. Ancient. Then a sound rose from the streets below. Not a whisper. Not a breath. A deep, resonant thrum, so low it rattled the glass in its frame.
Liz grabbed her coat.
We have to go, she said. Now. The apartment isn't safe. Where? I demanded. She met my eyes. Her expression was deadly serious. Down, she said. My throat closed. Into the understructure? Before something else drags us there first. The floor vibrated again. Harder. I didn't argue. We moved. Fast. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, I heard something that froze me mid-stride. From far down the stairwell, deep below, where there should have been only concrete and darkness, a whisper rose. Not from one bridge, not from many, but from all of them at once. Bring it back. Bring it back. Bring it back. Liz grabbed my wrist. Run. We did. And the city ran with us. We flew down the stairs, our footsteps echoing through the narrow shaft. Each floor we passed vibrated harder than the last, as if the entire building's bones were shuddering in response to the rising pulse beneath the city. By the time we reached the ground floor, plaster dust drifted from the ceiling like falling ash. Liz grabbed my arm before I could push the exit door open. Wait! There's no time. There's less time if you walk straight into its attention, she snapped. I froze. The whisper, no, the chorus of whispers, had deepened. It no longer sounded like distant voices drifting through stone. It sounded like it was standing on the other side of the door, listening, breathing, waiting. Liz pressed her ear to the cool metal. I held my breath. Then, quietly, she said, "It's not on the street." "What is?" "The attention." Her fingers tightened on the door handle. "It's focused further west, toward the fracture we saw. So we go east." She nodded once. Fast and quiet. I swallowed hard and nodded back. Liz eased the door open. A cold, heavy mist wafted inside immediately, curling around our feet. The street lamps buzzed overhead, flickering like candles in the wind. The silence was unnatural. Not the stillness of a sleeping neighborhood, but the tension of something massive holding its breath. We slipped into the street. I tucked the key deep into my coat pocket, feeling its unnatural warmth pulse against my leg. It felt like a heartbeat, slow and steady, out of sync with my own, but alive in its own rhythm. Liz noticed the twitch in my jaw. "Keep your mind off it," she whispered. "Holding it is one thing. Thinking about it is another. That's not really something I can control. You'll have to." We kept to the shadows, darting between alleyways, avoiding open streets as much as possible. The tremors grew slightly weaker the farther we moved from the broken footbridge, but the mist grew thicker, rolling in heavy banks that swallowed the lamplight. Several times, I thought I saw shapes moving in it, tall, thin silhouettes pacing beneath the bridges, drifting along the riverbanks. Liz saw them too. She grabbed my sleeve and pulled me into the shelter of a boarded-up storefront. 3 shapes slid through the mist ahead, too tall, too elongated to be human. Their limbs moved in slow, deliberate motions, like the mist itself was tugging them forward. Their heads turned, jerking slightly, as if listening. "What are they?" I whispered.
Equivokish, Lis Breed.
People who listen too long. My stomach clenched. Are they alive? Not the way we are. The nearest of them paused, head cocked sharply in our direction. Liz clamped a hand over my mouth. "Don't breathe," she mouthed. The figure stepped closer. Its movements were wrong, flowing in some places, snapping in others. As it passed directly in front of our hiding spot, I saw its face. Dry river silt clung to its skin, cracked and flaking. Its eyes were wide, unfocused, pupils blown wide as if swallowed by darkness. Its lips moved constantly, soundlessly, like it was repeating something over and over, a whisper only it could hear. Liz's hand dug painfully into my arm. I didn't dare blink. The echo walker paused again. Then, slowly, it turned away and continued down the street. We waited until all 3 vanished. Only then did Liz release me. "That's what happens when the bridges claim you," she said in a low voice. "Not all of them drown their listeners. Some repurpose them. That used to be a person. Still is." A chill slid down my spine. "But not for long," she added. We moved again, even more cautiously. The Eastern District was quieter, almost eerily so. The buildings here were older, decades abandoned, marked for demolition but still standing because no crew dared to remove a structure that touched the river. The bridges ran like veins through this part of the city. Narrow, brittle, trembling. Liz stopped us in front of a rusted grate set into the sidewalk. "Here," she said. "What is this?" "Maintenance shaft. Leads down to the lower walkways. You said we were heading east." "We are." She knelt and lifted the grate with surprising strength. "This is the only way down without crossing another bridge." The darkness inside yawned like an open mouth. Every instinct screamed no. But behind us, the streets trembled again, harder this time. A crack spidered down the wall of the nearest building.
Lis glanced over her shoulder.
"It's spreading." "What is?" "The waking." Another tremor. Strong. Violent. Then another. Far off, something enormous groaned. Not stone. Not metal. Something alive. Now, Liz said urgently. Get in. I swallowed my fear and dropped into the dark. My boots hit metal. Liz followed, pulling the grate shut above us. We were swallowed in near-total blackness. The only light a faint orange glow from Liz's small pocket lamp. The shaft descended steeply in a series of rusted rungs. The air smelled of wet stone and stagnant river water. Watch your step, she whispered. I climbed carefully. The metal creaked with each movement, as if warning us it hadn't been touched in years. After a long descent, we reached a narrow landing leading to a tunnel, the old service walkway. The walls sweated moisture. The ground sloped downward, deeper into the city's underbelly. I turned to Liz. Where does this go? Her lamp flickered across the dripping walls. To the roots of the bridge network, she said. To the place the first architects built their anchors. And what do you expect to find there? She hesitated. Then, answers. Or a mouth. My pulse stuttered. Why do I feel like you've been here before? I whispered. Because I have. And survived. She didn't answer. We walked. The tunnel narrowed, squeezing us between walls that felt too close, too organic, like the stone curved inward on purpose. The farther we went, the louder the faint vibrations became, not tremors, but a steady rhythmic pulse. A heartbeat, growing stronger. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. My breath caught. This place wasn't made of stone. It wasn't made of anything human. The walls were ribbed, hugely massively, like an enormous cage of fossilized bone. Each rib connected to thick, ancient pillars that plunged into the depths below. The air hummed, vibrating in slow waves. Liz lifted the lamp. This is what they built the bridges on, she whispered. Not earth, not bedrock. This. The pulse shook the floor beneath our feet. I stepped forward, drawn by something I couldn't name. Then something answered, not with a whisper, but with a voice like a deep tidal pull. You carry my lock. The chamber darkened. Bring it to me. Liz grabbed my arm, but the ground cracked open beneath us. The chamber shuddered violently, dust raining down from the rib-like walls. I stumbled, almost dropping the key, but Liz yanked me upright, her grip iron-strong. The pulse beneath our feet grew louder, vibrating through my bones until it felt like it had replaced my heartbeat entirely. A shadow slithered along the far wall, a ripple in the ribbed stone that shouldn't have moved. It stretched, forming a dark, twisting shape that rose like smoke given form. Its head tilted, faceless, but I knew it was looking at me. You brought it. I swallowed, my mouth dry. I don't know how to use it. You know what it unlocks. I shook my head violently. No. I don't. Liz's hand dug into my arm. Stop arguing with it. Listen to me, she hissed. Keys like that aren't for doors you can see. They're for doors that see you. That's why it called to you. That's why the bridges whispered. It wants the lock returned to its mouth. I stared at her, but my mind was a tangle of fear. A mouth. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, shaking. A mouth. The heart of the thing beneath the city. That's what the bridges are anchoring. And that's where the key belongs. The shadow moved closer. The pulse beneath us accelerated, hammering against our rib cages, echoing through the chamber like a storm trapped underground. It wasn't just waiting, it was hungry.
I glansed at Liz.
She was pale, trembling, but her eyes were sharp, almost relieved. It's awake. You have to put the key in the mouth. Otherwise what? I didn't want to ask. I couldn't bear the answer. The shadow stretched higher, fog-like tendrils reaching toward us. The vibration beneath our feet surged, waves of energy rolling through the chamber as if the city itself groaned in agony. I clutched the key so tightly my fingers ached. Step forward, Liz commanded. Her voice was firm now, no trace of fear. Don't fight it. That's what it wants. Step forward. I did, trembling. Every instinct screamed to run, to throw the key, to vanish into the tunnels behind us, but my feet obeyed. Slowly, I moved toward the shadow, toward the center of the chamber where the darkness pooled like a liquid. The pulse beneath me shifted, focusing upward, converging into a hollow cavity within the shadow. And then, as if the chamber itself exhaled, a massive gap opened, a yawning void at the center of the form. It was enormous, circular, impossibly deep, lined with jagged ridges that shimmered faintly green under the dim light of Lys's lamp. The mouth. It was alive, hungry, ancient. Everything Lys had said, amplified by the raw terror of the moment. The vibration became a roar in my skull. I raised the key. My hands shook violently. I wanted to scream, but no sound would leave my lips. The shadow leaned closer, a swirl of dark mist-forming tendrils that teased the edges of the mouth, brushing the floor and walls, pulsing with anticipation. Give it to me. I swallowed. I stepped forward. The key felt impossibly heavy, almost molten in my hand. My chest burned. My head ached, but I forced myself closer to the mouth. Lys's voice cut through the terror. Don't stop. Put it in. Now. I reached out. The key trembled between my fingers. The shadow pulsed violently, as if breathing through the very chamber. My vision blurred. The air thickened, and the pulse beneath me became a deafening roar. And then contact. The key touched the edge of the mouth. The shadow shuddered. The tendrils recoiled. The chamber seemed to tilt, the walls vibrating like living bone. I felt a suction like the world was pulling me in, and the whispers, all of them, rose in a screaming chorus, as if the bridges themselves were crying out. It is returning. The key slipped into the gap. The mouth closed. The pulse stopped, and for a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, a sound so deep, so resonant, it felt like it was being drilled into my very soul. A slow, deliberate exhale. The shadow receded. The tendrils pulled back. The chamber shook one last time, then stilled. The rib-like walls seemed to straighten, solidify, as if the city itself had sighed in relief. I dropped to my knees, gasping. My chest ached. The key fell from my hands, landing in the shallow pool of water at my feet. It was cold, lifeless again. Lys exhaled sharply, gripping my shoulder. It's done, for now. I looked at the chamber. The shadow was gone. The pulse, the whispers, the hunger, everything vanished. For the first time tonight it was quiet, but deep in my mind, I felt a lingering awareness. Something ancient, something patient, something vast. It had been woken and it had eaten, but it had been contained, returned, anchored, restrained. The bridges above us were silent. The tunnels were still. The city, momentarily, slept again. I sank to the floor, exhausted, trembling, realizing the key wasn't just a key. It was a choice, and I had made it. Lys knelt beside me, voice barely a whisper. You're marked now. The bridges know you. They'll always know you. Swallowed hard. So, what happens next? She shook her head, her expression grim. We survive, until the next time it stirs. And one day it will. The city never rests, and neither does what lies beneath it. I stared at the dark, ribbed walls. The pulse may have stopped for now, but the memory of it, of the hunger, of the mouths in the shadows, would never leave me. The bridges above would continue to whisper, and I would always hear them. Always. The tunnels were quiet as we made our way back toward the surface. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down not by exhaustion alone but by the knowledge that the city above us had shifted, imperceptibly yet irreversibly. The bridges were silent now, but I could feel them in the walls, in the pipes, in the river itself. Watching, waiting. Lys walked ahead, her lamp casting long, distorted shadows against the wet stone. She didn't speak. I didn't need her to. The silence between us was full of unspoken questions. When we finally emerged into the street, the city looked normal. Dim streetlights reflected on puddles. Cars rested parked along the curbs. The river moved lazily beneath the bridges, calm and unassuming. Anyone passing by would see nothing unusual. But I knew better. I knew the bridges had simply returned to their vigilance. Dormant, patient, their whispers temporarily stilled but never gone. Liz guided me back through the side streets, avoiding any crossing that might tempt them. We didn't talk much. My hands still ached from gripping the key, and every shadow seemed to twitch unnaturally at the corner of my vision. We reached her small apartment, a safe, tucked-away place, and for a moment I allowed myself to breathe. The immediate danger had passed. The mouth had been closed. The key returned. But I didn't feel relief. I felt unmarked. Liz set the lamp on the table and finally looked at me. Her expression softened yet grave. "You did what had to be done," she said quietly. "You returned the key, contained the mouth. The city is stable. For now." "For now," I repeated, my voice hollow. "How long before it wakes again?" She shook her head. "Days, months, years, maybe decades. But the bridges will always remember you. And they'll speak to you when they need you." A shiver ran through me. "So, this is never over?" "No," she said softly. "But we've bought time. That's all anyone ever can." I sank into a chair, staring at the lamp's dim glow. My mind replayed the chamber, the pulse, the shadow, the hunger of that ancient thing beneath the city. The echoes of the bridge's whispers still lingered in my ears. "You'll need to be careful," Liz continued. "Most people can ignore the bridges. You can't. You hear them. You feel them. And one day they'll call again." I nodded slowly. "Then I suppose I keep living and listening, but never too close." Liz managed a faint, grim smile. "Exactly." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the city's ordinary noises, the faint hum of distant traffic, the soft drip of rain onto the roofs. For now, nothing stirred. And yet I knew the bridges were still there, watching, breathing, whispering, and I would never forget the voices beneath them. No matter how far I walked, the city had marked me. The key was gone from my hand, but not from my mind. And I would carry the memory of that night for the rest of my life. Because some things in the city don't die. They wait, and some things never stop whispering.